Let's bring in our panel now to talk a little bit more about this. We have Josh Orton, Senior Advisor for Progressives United and former leadership aide to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Also joining us is Liz Peek, columnist for FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times. Thank you both for being here with us today, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to both of you guys.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, so Liz, let's start with you. De Blasio now really in crisis management mode, as I mentioned here. Do you see any way back from him for this politically?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's always a road back. I think he has to convince the people of New York City that he is on the side of law and order. This city has seen a very remarkable, safe 12 years under the former Mayor Bloomberg. People, were basically extremely happy with that. And unfortunately, we, by mistake, elected a mayor who came into office with a real chip on his shoulder about police tactics, brought Al Sharpton, of all people, onto the stage of City Hall, giving the impression that Al Sharpton was basically part and parcel of our new policy towards law enforcement. Obviously went after stop and frisk, a policy that had been proved very successful in New York City. Look, there were some issues in New York, and unfortunately the death of Eric Garner kind of gave everyone a rallying point for any qualms people had about police tactics. But the truth is, before de Blasio took office, the polling on New York City police was extremely positive, not just by whites, but also by blacks. He has set us back 10 years.
Well, Josh, let me ask you about this, because we talked about this earlier from former Senator George Lemieux. There's a responsibility, he said now, for both Bill de Blasio and President Obama to distance themselves from Al Sharpton. What do you say?
Well, I think that what we're looking at is a dynamic in New York that goes literally back decades between folks like Rudy Giuliani trying to fearmonger and divide communities within New York against the police and against the mayor. This is something he did 20 years ago to try and get elected. And I think that, look, I agree with folks who are saying, look, we need to sort of take a step back here. I don't usually agree with Governor Andrew Cuomo on everything, but I think that, when he said that all sides need to sort of take stock here and look at how they've been talking and been acting and been relating to different communities. I think it's been outrageous what the police union had said about how they're going to be a wartime police department and they'll act accordingly. That's irresponsible both to the communities they serve and to the police officers.
But the reason why he's making that type of statement, and maybe Liz will agree with me on this, the reason why he's making that type of statement is because de Blasio has lost the confidence of his police department. Not only that, he's also apparently lost the confidence of the people that he's supposed to lead, the city of New York, asking for them not to protest today, but they're doing it anyway. Liz, what do you say?
Well, look, I mean, I think when de Blasio came out and talked about how he had lectured his son Dante, who is African American, on how he may be threatened by the police, thus implying a really inherent racial bias to New York City cops, I thought that was really beyond the pale. So de Blasio does have some of this on his head. He has fomented the view that the cops are on the other side of the table from people of color. This is not the way you bring a city together. And by the way, Josh is wrong. It was not fear mongering that Giuliani engaged in. I lived in New York City in the 1970s. You couldn't park your car on the street without fear of it being broken into.
Giuliani wasn't running for mayor in the 1970s.
There were serious crime issues in New York City. It was a lawless city.
I'm not talking about the 70s.
Well, I am, because people of my generation are looking at what's going on now, the dumbing down of police enforcement, and we're saying here's the point. It's not just bad for the people of the city generally and for commerce and for schools that are trying to attract students from around the world. It's also worst for people in the minority communities. Those communities are the ones who take a tremendous hit when law enforcement steps back. And that's what we're likely to see here.
All right, well, Liz, we're going to leave that point right there for a brief moment. We're going to take a short commercial break. We'll come right back with Josh Orton and Liz Peek, continue to talk about the fallout from this assassination on these two New York City police officers. America's Forum continues right after this. Let's bring back in our panel to continue our conversation now Josh Orton, Senior Advisor for Progressives United and former leadership aide to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Also Liz Peek, columnist at FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times. Guys, thanks for coming back. one of the reasons why I think Rudy Giuliani can get so far out in front of this issue is because he has a track record of success in terms of public safety in New York City. Josh, I bet you probably disagree, so we'll let you pick up there.
Well, there's no doubt that crime rates in New York City have decreased greatly. As I point out, they've decreased nationwide. But it really gets under my skin when Rudy Giuliani just throws out such irresponsible statements like this. Look, we're talking about here the experience of a community and those who are policing the people of New York. And going back to what Liz said about Mayor de Blasio's comments about his son Dante, I think this is a question of whether or not we're going to fundamentally agree on the fact that the experience on the street of cities like New York with police officers is in some basic way, fundamentally different for a young black man than it is for a young white man. And if we're not going to agree that they're going to have some different experiences when they interact with the police, and I think statistics will back that up over and over again, then we're not going to agree. And I think that in that case, Bill de Blasio was not sending a message to the police. He was talking about a conversation, an unfortunate conversation, as a father that frankly he would rather not have had in the first place. And if we can't agree on that fundamental experience for young black men and young black women on the streets of our cities, I feel like we're at an impasse.
Liz, what do you think about Josh and what others have said on that same line, that it is just simply different for young black men to grow up in this country?
Okay, I would agree with him. I think there is a greater risk that a young black man is stopped and questioned by the police than a young white man. Why is that? It's because most of the crime takes place in the black communities. You know, Jason Riley talks about all this all the time, an African-American reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and he's totally right. I mean, again, the people who are most disadvantaged when we start dumbing down law enforcement are people in the communities that are not safe. Which communities are there? It's not where I live, thank heavens, and I feel badly for the people who live in those communities which are riddled with crime. I mean, I don't disagree with Josh. I think that is a natural outgrowth of the fact that we have such a crime problem in some parts of every urban city. But here's what I think he's wrong about. The broken windows approach to policing, the idea that starting with small infractions, which basically led to the stop, frisk, and question approach, you know, trying to get rid of the graffiti on the subways and broken windows, literally, in abandoned houses. We have seen that works. That has recently been exported, for example, to Detroit, where they have a huge crime problem.
And I look, we can study the effectiveness of the broken windows theory of policing, but I think the conservatives especially are sort of going to can't have their cake and eat it too here. On one hand, we see national Republicans say that, well, look at what happened to Eric Garner with the chokehold and his death. This wouldn't have happened if we hadn't over-regulated all these things, and why are selling loose cigarettes made illegal in the first place? And, you know, why are we passing so many laws? But on the other hand, conservatives are roundly backing up the Giuliani theory of broken windows, which is basically to enforce the most minor basic
because it worked, Josh.
infractions.
Because it worked, and we'll leave that there. I just want to wrap up. We got about 20 seconds left to go. One quick question. Yes or no question. We got to end it, guys. I'm sorry, I'm up against the hard break. How does all this affect Loretta Lynch moving forward? Obviously, this discussion has increased the tension now with these two deaths. Does it play a role in Loretta Lynch's confirmation? Yes or no? Josh, go ahead, and then Liz.
Absolutely not. She's the most qualified nominee. It would be ridiculous to say otherwise.
All right, Liz, what do you say?
I think her nomination will probably go through, but it will be a forum for these discussions.
All right, fair enough. Everybody, happy holidays. Thank you both for being with us. America's Forum continues right after this.